There is a ghost in the machine of modern agriculture, a glaring mathematical anomaly that we have been trained to overlook for nearly a century. If I were to hand you a blueprint that guaranteed a biomass increase of 400% without adding a single ounce of chemical fertilizer, you would likely ask for the patent number or the corporate sponsor. But you cannot patent geometry, and that is precisely why this knowledge has been allowed to rust in the archives of history while industrial giants sell us bags of nitrogen. We are standing at the edge of a vast, invisible crime scene where the victim is biological potential itself. The straight row, that sacred symbol of the modern farm, is not a biological necessity. It is a manufacturing defect imposed by the limitations of iron and oil. When you force a living, breathing ecosystem into a rigid Cartesian grid, you are effectively declaring war on the physics of light and the fluid dynamics of air. We have tragically traded the exponential, resonant power of the circle for the linear, fragile simplicity of the assembly line. By prioritizing the tractor over the tree, we have strangled the soil's capacity to regenerate, mistaking the prison bars of the row for the order of nature. To understand the magnitude of what we have lost, you must first be willing to admit that the way you have been taught to visualize a farm is a lie constructed for the convenience of a machine. To find the root of this geometric tyranny, we must dig into the hardened clay of the early 20th century, specifically the moment the internal combustion engine replaced the beating heart of the draft animal. While Jethro Tull's seed drill of 1701 whispered the first suggestion of the straight line, it was the roar of the Farmall tractor in 1924 that screamed it into law. Before this mechanization, the farmer walked the contours of the land, planting in patterns that respected the topography and the chaotic drift of water. But the machine is blind to topography. It demands a flat, predictable runway. The standardization of agriculture was never about the biological optimization of the seed. It was entirely about the mechanical optimization of the axle. We redesigned the planet to accommodate the limitations of a gearbox. By the time the Dust Bowl rolled across the American plains in the 1930s, we had already stripped the Earth of its three-dimensional complexity, shaving it down to a two-dimensional grid to serve the efficiency of the combine harvester. We forgot that a plant is a radial entity evolving for millions of years to capture light from a moving sun and water from shifting winds, not to stand at attention like a soldier in a phalanx. The row is a structure of isolation, separating each plant by a calculated distance of dead soil solely to prevent the tractor tires from crushing the crop, creating a vacuum where life is forbidden so that iron may pass unhindered. We are not farming, we are managing a logistical corridor for heavy machinery, and the plants are merely the terrified bystanders in a highway system built for their harvest. To understand why the circle succeeds where the row fails, we must resurrect the work of the Austrian naturalist Victor Schauberger, a forgotten pioneer of the 1930s, who was ridiculed by the academic elite for claiming that nature uses only the curved form. Schauberger discovered that fluids, including the nutrient-rich sap within a plant and the water in the soil, move most efficiently in a spiral, cycloid motion. When we force plants into straight lines, we are fighting against the natural angular momentum of biological growth. But the geometry of the circle unlocks a phenomenon known in ecology as the edge effect, a principle observed by Aldo Leopold in 1933, but largely ignored by industrial agronomy. In a standard monoculture grid, the edge, where the forest meets the field, is the only place where biodiversity thrives. By planting in dense circular clusters, we artificially increase this edge surface area, tricking the environment into a state of hyperproductivity. This is not magic. It is the physics of resonance. When trees are planted in isolation, separated by the barren fire breaks of tractor rows, they are biologically silenced. However, When grouped in a nucleus formation, their bioelectric fields overlap. Research into plant neurobiology suggests that root tips emit weak electrical impulses akin to a nervous system. In a dense circle, these signals amplify rather than dissipate. The plants stop competing for dominance and begin to act as a singular organism, a phenomenon known as constructive interference in wave physics. They grow faster not because they are fighting for light, but because the cluster creates a localized atmospheric pressure zone that literally draws nutrients up from the soil with greater hydraulic force than a solitary stem could ever muster. We have been treating plants like statues in a museum when we should have been treating them like coils in a generator. We have committed a grave error by treating the atmosphere as empty space when, in reality, it is a fluid medium with the same physical properties as water. When you plant trees in straight, parallel rows, you are inadvertently constructing a wind tunnel. By aligning vegetation in corridors, you invoke the Venturi effect. As the wind is funneled between the walls of crop rows, its velocity must increase to maintain continuity. This accelerated airstream acts like a vacuum cleaner, violently stripping away the boundary layer, a microscopic shield of humid air that clings to the surface of every leaf. When this protective layer is shredded by high-velocity wind, the plant panics. Its stomata, the tiny pores responsible for breathing, snap shut to prevent fatal dehydration. Photosynthesis grinds to a halt. The plant is no longer growing, it is merely holding its breath, waiting for the wind to die down. The straight row is a geometry of stress. Contrast this with the aerodynamic brilliance of the circle. When wind encounters a curved dome-like cluster of vegetation, it does not accelerate through it. It is forced to separate and flow over it. This creates a zone of low pressure above the canopy, generating lift, while the center of the circle remains a pocket of relative calm. In this protected eye, the air becomes stagnant and heavy. Since carbon dioxide is approximately 1.5 times heavier than oxygen, it settles into this calm basin, creating a naturally carbon-enriched microatmosphere right where the leaves need it most. While the row-cropped field is being desiccated by a manufactured gale, the circular guild is basking in a nutrient-dense fog. We are not just planting trees, we are sculpting the airflow to turn the invisible violence of the wind into a caress that feeds the crop. While we obsess over the canopy, the true engine of survival is humming in the dark, inches beneath our boots. In the conventional row model, a plant's root system is a prisoner of solitary confinement. Separated by the compacted dead earth of the tractor lane, roots are physically prevented from touching their neighbors, forcing every individual plant to fight its own biochemical battles. This is the agricultural equivalent of an isolation ward. But in a dense circular planting, we unlock the underground circuitry of root grafting, scientifically known as natural anastomosis. When trees of the same guild are clustered, their roots physically fuse, creating a shared vascular system. This is not poetry, it is plumbing. Through this fused network, plants exchange sugars, water, and hormones, effectively socializing the risk of survival. If one tree on the outer ring taps into a water pocket, it hydraulically redistributes that moisture to the center through the xylem channels of the collective. More critically, this proximity supercharges the mycelial network, the fungal internet of the soil. In the vacuum of the crop row, fungal hyphae are constantly torn apart by tillage, severing the communication lines. In the permanent no-till zone of a circle, these fungi form a hyperdense mat, acting as a secondary root system that mines minerals like phosphorus with acidic enzymes that plant roots alone cannot produce. The electrical conductivity of the soil spikes in these clusters, facilitating rapid ion exchange, cation exchange capacity. By forcing separation, we have created weak, neurotic individuals dependent on our chemical support. By allowing connection, we create a communal immune system capable of defending itself. We must address the fundamental geometric incompetence of modern agriculture, the attempt to catch a spherical light source with a flat net. The sun does not hover statically overhead. It traverses the sky in a complex arc defined by azimuth and elevation. Yet, the conventional row farm treats the land as a two-dimensional plane, a flat sheet of paper. This is the planar fallacy. In a monoculture row, leaves are positioned to compete for the vertical noon sun, which accounts for only a fraction of the photoperiod. For the rest of the day, as the sun sits at lower angles in the morning and evening, the straight rows cast long, useless shadows upon the bare soil between them. We are effectively throwing away gigajoules of solar energy because our geometry is incompatible with the mechanics of the solar system. The circular planting method creates a solar trap by mimicking the geometry of a hemisphere. By arranging plants in a stepped dome, shorter species on the perimeter, rising to a tall apex tree in the center, we construct a three-dimensional photovoltaic surface. Simple geometry dictates that the surface area of a hemisphere is twice that of the circular area of land it occupies. This means that for every square meter of soil, a dome-shaped gild offers 2 square meters of photosynthetic surface area. As the sun moves from east to west, the curved face of the gild ensures that some portion of the canopy is always perpendicular to the incoming rays, maximizing the angle of incidence. The structure does not need to rotate like a high-tech solar tracker because it is the tracker. It captures the low-angle light of dawn and dusk that a flat row lets slip by. By abandoning the flat plane for the dome, we are not just farming land, we are farming volume, doubling our harvest potential simply by acknowledging that the world is not flat. Now that we have dismantled the illusion of the row, we must erect the architecture of the circle. This is not a theoretical exercise, it is a construction project. The fundamental unit of this system is not the field, but the gild, a self-contained biological engine driven by a specific geometry. To build it, you must think like an architect, not a laborer. Step 1. The anchor point, the apex. You begin by driving a stake into the ground. This is your axis mundi, the center of your universe. Here, you plant your apex species, the long-term canopy tree that will define the vertical limit of your dome, for example, oak, chestnut, pecan, or a high-standard fruit tree. This tree is the king. It will not yield a harvest for years, but its taproot will act as the hydraulic pump for the entire system, drilling deep into the water table to bring moisture up to the surface soil layers through hydraulic lift. Step 2. The calculation of radius. From this center stake, tie a rope. The length of this rope is critical. For a standard fruit gild, a radius of 1.5 to 2 meters is the golden mean. Walk the circle, marking the perimeter with lime or sand. You are defining the boundary of your biological reactor. Inside this line, no metal plow will ever touch the earth again. This is a sanctuary of permanent soil structure. Step 3. The support ring, the wet nurses. On this perimeter line, you do not plant your cash crops yet. You plant the wet nurses, fast-growing, nitrogen-fixing species like Leucaena, Gliricidia, or Tagasaste, and biomass accumulators like comfrey or vetiver grass. These are the sacrificial lambs. Their job is not to produce fruit, but to produce soil. As they grow, you will ruthlessly chop and drop their branches, laying them on the soil surface to create an instant mulch layer. They are the living fertilizer factory that surrounds and serves the king in the center. By placing them on the perimeter, they act as the windbreak and the sun trap, shielding the vulnerable apex tree during its infancy. We are building a fortress, and these are the walls. Once you have established the central nucleus, the temptation is to line them up like soldiers, reverting to the very grid we are trying to dismantle. You must resist this. Nature does not tile in squares, she packs in hexagons. To scale this system from a garden to a farm, we utilize the geometry of the honeycomb, scientifically known as hexagonal packing or the flower of life pattern. Instead of placing your next circle directly adjacent to the first on a cardinal axis, you offset it, nesting it into the curve of the previous guild. This is the most mathematically efficient way to pack spheres on a plane, maximizing the density of biomass while minimizing the wasted space between them. In this layout, the negative space, the awkward gaps between the touching circles, becomes your access network. Unlike the raw farm, where the tractor path is the dominant feature and the plant is the marginal resident, here the living soil takes up the vast majority of the acreage, and the path is reduced to a winding organic capillary system. You move through your farm not in long, boring straight lines, but in a rhythmic, weaving motion that forces you to observe every angle of the guild. As you expand, adding circle upon circle, you are not building a plantation, you are growing a tissue. If disease strikes a row farm, it shoots down the corridor like a bullet in a gun barrel. In a cellular, hexagonal array, the transmission is blocked by the natural fire breaks of diversity and the discontinuous geometry. The farm becomes a compartmentalized, resilient organism where the failure of one cell does not dictate the doom of the whole. You have moved from the fragile efficiency of the crystal to the robust adaptability of the sponge. We arrive now at the precipice of a choice that extends far beyond the arrangement of seeds in the dirt. The question is no longer about yield. The question is about allegiance. For the last century, we have been asking, how can I make this land easier for my tractor to drive over? Instead of asking, how can I make this land explode with life? We have redesigned the living world to flatter the limitations of a gearbox, sacrificing the abundance of the biosphere for the convenience of the mechanic. The straight line is not just a planting technique, it is the geometry of control, a visible scar of our attempt to dominate a chaotic world we were meant to steward. It turns the farmer into a factory manager and the soil into a substrate for chemical injections. But the circle is the geometry of belonging. It acknowledges that we are part of a system that curves, cycles, and returns to itself. When you plant in a circle, you are effectively declaring independence from the industrial supply chain. You are stating that you trust the physics of the wind, the graft of the root, and the angle of the sun more than you trust the promise of a fertilizer bag. The 400% increase in yield is not a miracle. It is simply the interest paid by nature when you stop fighting her. The grid is a cage, and for too long we have been locking ourselves inside it, staring out at a starving world through the bars of our own making. The revolution you are looking for will not come from a laboratory or a government subsidy. It begins the moment you walk out into your field, ignore the straight edge of the fence, drive a single stake into the ground, and draw a line that bends.